Good afternoon and welcome back to the Asia Scotland Institute's podcast. In coordination with the Defence and Security Forum, the Institute has arranged this important and very timely event to provide an analysis of the current situation and possible future developments in Israel. Today we are joined by Shay Zavaro, who is the Managing Director of Monfort Advisory, a leading strategic advisory firm based in Israel, to ask him for his views on what's going on at the moment. Also with us is Marco Vicenzino, who is a member of the Asia Scotland Institute's International Advisory Council and a regular commentator on global affairs as a geopolitical expert. I'll pass over to Roddy Gow, Chairman and Founder of the Asia Scotland Institute, to open up the discussion.
So Shay, if I could start by asking you to very kindly give us your comments on the current situation, how it is developing and how you see it developing in the future. And then, Marco, I'll switch over to you for a response and observations. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Roddy. It's great to be here. Thanks for giving me this platform to tell you how things have started, what was the emotions, how we kind of get a grip together here in Israel, and now what is the situation at the moment, really. So basically, Saturday morning started with a complete chaos. Israel was penetrated in the south, most of the settlements around Gaza area, with a complete vagueness around what's going on, both from the public and I believe also from the government side, and more importantly, the IDF side. I think the only people who were visible to the situation were the actual media and also the people suffering on the ground. We have experienced such an attack that we've never seen before in the level of cruelty, and that kind of transforms everything, or all the perception at least Israel had on Hamas in the last 10 years. Since I would say yesterday, there was a bit more visibility of the level of disaster of what has happened. And we understand that from the beginning of the operation of Hamas, 3 military bases were captured. Okay, and then basically this, together with a bit of, I would say, forces going to secure the West Bank, mainly Hawara and Joseph Thone, were staying there. The 3 bases were neutralized by Hamas. Then the rest of the militants, you can call them militants, terrorists, entered civil towns and completely occupied them. This basically led to what we see at the moment. Okay, we see the Israeli government completely remove all gloves. It began scaling up. There was a bit of criticism from Sunday why we are going again so soft against the Hamas. However, you could see it really scaling up today. Now, at the moment, there are still minor penetrations, okay, in the towns next to Gaza. However, there are no civilians there at the moment. We are seeing very forceful attacks from the military air force in Gaza, hitting over 1,500 targets already. I think it already reached 2,000. There is a great, I would say, I've never seen such not a global, but international support in the IDF's operation. The Israeli government is willing to take this gap in time and do whatever it can in order, as they set it, the government set the target to remove Hamas from power, to have no such organization at the moment. And this is the strategy of the Israeli government at the moment. A lot of fake news hitting the social networks, which has an impact in creating a bit more chaos with the communication between the citizens and the government. Having said that, I have to say Although we see a bit more clarity now, still the atmosphere is the atmosphere of chaos, okay? And I have to say, you asked from the beginning, what is the feelings of how this conflict will be spread around the region? I have to say that the first sentence, okay, commentators have and politicians have when the operation started, is not how many casualties we have or what is going to happen in Gaza. The eyes were towards the north, making sure that we are not getting hit by Hezbollah before there is a widespread of forces there. And obviously, we are very hopeful that Hezbollah would not enter into this situation. And I believe, okay, that Hezbollah at the moment lost the surprise element, and therefore it is quite unlikely for it to join at this stage. We will see some attacks in order to divert some of the attention from Gaza and to, as we say, nudge the Israeli defense forces, but I don't foresee more than that.
Thank you, Shay. That's very helpful. And Marco, you've been following these events in the normal course of your work. You've heard what Shay has said, and of course, the media coverage of this is extensive, which I've been watching. Your comments, Marco?
Yeah, I mean, I think look at it from an external perspective, looking in from the outside in. Looking at it from the outside in, obviously, there was massive surprise of what happened last Saturday morning. Obviously, Israeli security forces, Israeli intelligence, the entire, let's call it military security establishment, had an aura of invincibility outside of Israel. And to see what happened, what unfolded on Saturday morning, to a certain extent, pierces that aura of invincibility. The state of Israel, obviously, a cornerstone of its security and defense policy has been deterrence. And looking at an event of what happened last Saturday definitely does damage the credibility of that deterrence. And in order to restore that, obviously they need to make a very firm response. So although it was pierced, it's not that it's lost completely, but it's just going to take time in terms of restoring it. So that's, I think there's one sort of observation from the outside. Another one is in terms of the diplomatic process. Obviously, in the last year, 2 years, we have seen a process of normalization between Israel and some certain select Arab states. Under the Trump administration, you had the Abraham Accords, which was signing of recognition between Israel, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates. You also had the signing with Morocco during that time. And in recent weeks and months, the Biden administration is working very hard to have the normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And obviously, the United States is a key part of that, because as part of that, the United States will be making concessions also to Saudi in terms of greater defense. It wouldn't be an Article NATO 5 treaty, but something as close as you can get to it, more like, say, for example, what we have with the Philippines. So that would be part of the process. And, obviously, Saudi Arabia representing it's the holiest sites in Islam or in Saudi. For Israel, that would be a very, from a credibility perspective, from a diplomatic perspective, a huge injection for its diplomatic process worldwide. So I think on that front, one of the objectives, or several objectives of Hamas in this, was to try to undermine that entire process of diplomatic normalization between Israel and its neighbors, its Arab neighbors in the region. So far, I think what's happening now, that process is on hold. Obviously, much will depend on how long the crisis lasts, the magnitude and the scope of the current operations in Gaza. There's a lot of questions to be asked, and based upon those answers, there'll be a lot more clarity in terms of how things move on the diplomatic process. In terms of you look at Hezbollah was mentioned. Yes, I mean, if the operation can be as, I would say quick, because nothing is quick, but as effective and as that can generate results, I think the better it is. The longer it drags on, the more you increase the risks of some form of expansion of a more regional conflict just beyond Gaza. So I think time is of the essence on this one. But in terms of support, external support, enormous international support, diplomatic support that Israel has been getting on this, and then plus from Israel's chief ally, the United States. The United States also just is mobilizing an aircraft battle carrier group to the Eastern Mediterranean, the Gerald Ford, one of the latest aircraft carriers of the U.S. Navy. So I think in terms, if there would be something whereby there would be an expanded regional war, there would be a role to be determined, but there would be some form of role for the United States. But already the new weapons, armaments, support, material support is already beginning to flow to Israel. In case this winds up being dragged on, if this winds up being dragged on, in terms, obviously, there'll be some support in terms of material support for weaponry. And I think the United States has made quite clear that, that support will be coming as needed.
Thank you, Marco, very much for that. Shay, you've heard what Marco has said. Your observations on that, and then I'd like your view of the sort of psychological impact of the taking of these hostages and how that may play out.
Absolutely. So first of all, I can also add to what Marco has said and give the internal view. Marco is absolutely correct about the feeling of isolation from the Palestinian side, because for the first time in ages, Israel is winning on the diplomatic side. And how does it win? It gets closer to Saudi Arabia, the Abraham Accords, the peace with Bahrain. Let us not forget the strategic asset of the gas, the offshore gas that brings it closer to Jordan and Egypt. And this probably leaves out not only the Hamas, not only Hezbollah, but even higher than that, it leaves out Iran. And Iran is the major force, and let's not forget that, behind both Hezbollah and Hamas. Now, I can tell you that for a long time now, Iran is really pushing the Hamas and Hezbollah to make an action against Israel. And on our side, on the Israeli side, we did not view Hamas as this time as such a fundamentalist, religious, extreme organization as we see now. And the explanation for that is that in the last couple of years, Hamas has been under the radar, some sort of a partner that we can speak with, okay? In terms of the employee, we always said in Israel, we're never going to speak with Hamas, but most of the authority in Gaza, whether we add employees, whether we want to bring energy in, etc., it's with Hamas. And slowly, Netanyahu and the Israeli government started to feel safe because there were talks of increasing now the entrance of 20,000 employees into Israel and maybe building a solar panels outside of Gaza to enable electricity. So the future seemed a bit bright, but I think Israel has made a massive miscalculation. And the miscalculation is thinking in the last 5-6 years. We were not thinking about the essence and the agenda and the books of Hamas of the 87 that Palestine cannot exist along Israel. This, together with the geopolitical situation that Marco described, okay, has pushed Hamas to conduct such a brutal act, okay, in order to shake those blocks, okay, in the Middle East and bring Israel backward, which I think for the short term at the moment, it quite succeed in its act. Now, as for the questions of the captives, for the first time in a long time, for the first time, I would say, I can hear that the captives do not play a major role in the decision making on how hard the military operation should go on Gaza. And this is a change because part of the strategy of Hamas would say, we're going to capture as many hostages as we can, bring them in, and by that balance Israel response, because we know Israel's sensitivity towards its hostages. Now, one thing I would say, the higher the number of hostages, the lesser the value goes, the lesser the value of it. And Israel is currently plays it as a tool and part of the strategy. Okay, if Israel set it in the government cabinet, would say, we first finish the war in Gaza, then we are going to talk about the hostages. So there is no balance or a calculation of how we go in Gaza in consideration to the captives.
Yeah, Marco, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they've taken advantage of the fact that, once again, you talk about that sensitivity to human life. I mean, just in 2006, for one Israeli soldier, they exchanged 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for one Israeli soldier. Obviously, the different outlooks on the value of life, and we're taking the numbers are estimated. The last I heard was about 150 captives, and these are not soldiers. These are some soldiers. Many women, children, elderly. These are individuals, just members of society. So in that sense, they from their perspective and their calculation, they think they could slow down the attack on Gaza, particularly a ground assault. But I think at this point, I agree with my colleague here, is the fact is that you're not gonna link them together. Hamas is operating under the calculation that they're going to be linked together. They think they can slow down the operation based upon the fact that they'll start killing the hostages. But I think at this point, the situation is so urgent that they're going to have to go forward with the ground operation as soon as possible. Obviously, going to be mobilizing 300,000 to 100,000, reservists. That may take a bit of time, but I think overall things will move quite quickly on that front. Going back just to the point on the diplomatic front, obviously, the derailing that U.S.-Saudi, U.S. process, you can call it an alignment, was something that was key to Iran, because the last thing that Iran wants, in recent years, Iran has had an edge, a superior edge in the region with its alliance, its groups that it operates within through Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and that edge is under threat should that agreement be signed between Saudi, Israel, and the United States. It'll be a front upon which you can start to challenge directly and more effectively Iranian influence in the region. Hence, an attack like this, in trying to sabotage that entire process of normalization between Israel and its neighbors, is a key part of the Iranian strategy in the region. It's trying to hold that upper hand. And an alliance like that of the three countries I just described would be a serious threat in terms of its ability its effectiveness in the region strategically.
Yeah. Can I ask both of you another question, which is, what is the role of Russia, do you think, in this? Russia, presumably, which in some ways is delighted that attention has shifted away from Ukraine, where, of course, there's still a lot of violence and aggression going on. Does Russia have a hand in this game, Shay?
Well, I heard, a lot of assumptions from the most ludicrous one, such as Wagner is involved and more in that. I would say until today, Israel really did not do anything to upset Russia. In fact, Israel understands the Russian role in Israel's security. First of all, there is a large Russian community here, and we cannot ignore that. Secondly, the Russians were and still is in Syria, okay? And there is an Air Force coordination, okay, all the time regarding Israeli attacks in Syria. Yeah. Secondly, although Israel was asked over and over again in the last year for military assistance in Ukraine, which we could see rising just a bit recently, Israel wanted to stay in the middle because it understands, okay, that the Russians have close proximity to Lebanon, to Syria, and also has an internal role to play here in Israel, both in terms of the money and the community. Whether I am certain to say Russia has pushed Iran, okay, to force Hamas into this action, I am not sure. Whether it stayed neutral, etc., and said don't do it, I'm not sure about that either.
Yeah, it's sort of too early to tell, isn't it? Really, I suspect. And in terms of Iranian involvement or non-involvement, as an ex-military man, I would say that I was very surprised at the organization of Hamas and how they made the attack as they did. And then to pick up what Marco said, it was as if the IDF were asleep at the switch, and they really should have been much better prepared. This was something that has been seen coming for ages. Just going back to Iran, can you comment on that, Shah?
Going back to, so can you repeat the question?
Iranian involvement. It's not been, nobody has said, including the United States, that there's any evidence yet. But I wonder what the view is of your countrymen.
Absolutely. I think the Iranians are being brought up in every discussion, okay? Both the political discussion, the cabinet, it is obvious who is standing behind it. Whether there is an evidence about money transfers, etc., it is all over. We are quite sure about it. I think what is interesting, Rodi, to really investigate is what is the Iranian involvement in the beginning of the attack and cutting the intelligence lines, okay, and the video lines on the fence.
Yeah.
And this is something that we all should ask ourselves, because the Iranian interest is obvious. And I think also as a separate matter, and it's important for me to say it here, Hamas, it has to be, its action has to be something broader, because it could not be a unilateral action by itself, because Hamas destroyed its reputation, its legitimacy by all means by comparing itself to the Islamic State. And this has had to be taken to be a part of a broader plan, broader grand plan of either the Iranian regimes or Hezbollah, and this is why Israel is so concerned at the moment.
Thank you, Marco.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of involvement, I mean, the level of sophistication in this attack, definitely there was outside help. You talk about primarily Iranian sponsorship, but definitely Iran together with Hezbollah. I'd put them both together, both involved in this. And you see the level of coordination. It's too much. It would be too much just for, and this probably it took several months, if not at least a year, to prepare something of this magnitude, and definitely outside help. Obviously, one would want to try to get evidence to be able to support that. But I think it's important from a strategic perspective. If you're a security official, if you're a policymaker, you're someone who's making decisions, you have to operate upon that premise. I don't think there's anywhere else you can't leave questions to it. In terms of the public debate, media, public opinion, yes, you want to try to get evidence. But in terms of operating from a day-to-day perspective in the security realm, it's important to operate upon that premise. Listen, beforehand, it was clear that of the groups in Gaza operating, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, they had direct links with Iran. I think there was no surprise in that. They were quite open about that. And the question always was, what is Hamas's? So this was just not Hamas. Hamas was also Islamic Jihad, Palestinian PIJ was involved with Hamas on this. So you already have another group that has direct access to the Iranians on this one. So obviously Hamas is the major face on this. And there are differences. I mean, I wouldn't say so much ideological, but more on personalities between PIJ and Hamas. But they participated in this together. Part of this, you can call the jihadist front with the support of Iran, which is a bit of there's an inconsistency in this. I mean, one being a Shiite power together, obviously they're at enemies, and quite enemies with the Sunni fundamentalists. But I think in this case, their common enemy brought them together, i.e., their enemy being Israel and the broader West at large. And there's more of a, you call it, an operation of convenience between the two, between PIJ and Hamas. But I think that once, and there was an overreach. They overreached big time. And the thing is that even for Hezbollah in Lebanon, you have many ordinary Lebanese citizens, whether they're Christian Lebanese, Sunni Lebanese, even members of within the Shia and other groups and other minorities. The situation in Lebanon is so bad economically, they are completely on their knees economically. The last thing they want on their hands is a war with Israel or bombings in Beirut or other places. So I think even for Hezbollah may try down to somewhat downplay it inside Lebanon, because if there is an expansion of this war and the missiles start going between Israel and Lebanon, that economic situation, which is already terrible, I mean, for the ordinary citizen, it'll get much worse. And sort of a brewing of animosity towards Hezbollah at the grassroots level amongst ordinary non-combatant civilians has increased over the years, particularly as they resent the fact that they are going through such a difficult situation economically, and many within Hezbollah and their community actually are not suffering in the same way that other Lebanese are suffering. So if this war were to expand, you always see a turn of public opinion against Hezbollah domestically in Lebanon and in other parts of the region also. People in the region, generally speaking, do not want a war.
Thank you, Marco. I'm going to sort of start winding down. So, Shay, I wonder if I could ask you, almost sort of in conclusion, for your thoughts and how you see this ending.
In terms of my conclusions, would be a bit different. At the moment, there is a complete mistrust between the Israeli public and the government. And this is a very awkward situation to run a war in.
Yeah.
Secondly, there is a complete disorganization, okay, within who is doing what, not in terms of the fighting, but logistically. And by that, we see the Israeli public really getting behind the IDF and assisting and doing things that the government should have done. And this criticism will come back afterwards, but it will be interesting to see how Israel runs like this. I see a couple, 2 or 3 weeks more in Gaza. And as my colleague said in the beginning, the shorter, the better. However, this is not the situation. The situation is that Israeli government has set a target to remove Hamas. This is something that was never said in quite a, we were all shocked, when we heard it. Finally, they say such a thing, but let's see how it plays. And removing Hamas from power and disarming him from arms and becoming and dismantle this whole organization, it's not something that can be done in 1 or 2 weeks. It's something that needs to be taken a month. And Israel, the last thing they want to do at the moment is go for the ground force, but they might do it if they need it, which means more time. Now, as I see the north, Hezbollah, the last thing, first of all, it's separated. The last thing Lebanon wants to do is really enter to the war with Israel, both of the economic situation, the gas operations in the north that's currently starting to gain some flesh and blood. But I don't see Hezbollah interfering now. I think the momentum for Hezbollah to attack in Israel is gone. The method was taken by Hamas because Hezbollah was planning for years a very similar operation by Radwan forces, and the same method was taken by Hamas. I think it will take some time until it surprises the IDF again. So I certainly see a few more weeks. Very hard to believe that Hamas will disappear forever. Okay, And I believe it will end up with a concrete ceasefire, very heavy losses in Gaza, a lot of time to repair on both sides, and really it's very hard to tell at the moment what will be the diplomatic situation afterwards.
And how strong is Netanyahu at the moment?
At the moment, Netanyahu, let me put it this way. If Netanyahu was Mr. Security before, and with all the social unrest we had here in Israel, okay, having the left wing camp and the right wing camp, and the right wing camp were supporting the fact that they are the ones you should trust because they believe in destroying the Hamas, and they are the people who believe in security and not peace. How it all looks right now. When Netanyahu and the government had a very big sleep on Saturday morning, and we find ourselves in a nightmare scenario that we never thought we see.
Yeah.
Hamas soldiers conquering towns in Israeli soil, and I don't think there's much argument to say behind that, and I think we'll have to come to give some very strong explanations afterwards.
Thank you, Shay. That's very helpful and very observant of you. Marco, in concluding, your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, right now, there's the argument of what happened, why it happened, and when it happened. It's a serious debate to be had, but I think for the immediate right now, there's other things that are necessary to be taken care of. And you draw parallels to the 1973 war with Golda Meir. Measures needed to be taken immediately, and the measures were taken immediately. What seemed to be a losing situation at first, and then things turned around. Netanyahu, obviously, the creation of a national unity government, pushing forward with the operation, he has a very limited window of opportunity to turn things around. But even then, afterwards, people will not forget the scenes that took place last Saturday morning. So I think right now his political future is hanging right now in the midst. But he has a responsibility to move forward as quickly as possible to try to create as much national unity in light of the recent months of the division within the society. Once that situation, hopefully it'll stabilize sooner rather than later. And then from there, you're gonna have to start, they're gonna have to start taking account of actually what happened. And history may not be that kind to him. It's still up in the it's up for grabs right now. Only time will tell.
Good. Marco, thank you very much for those remarks, and thank you, and Shay, thank you so much as well. We are uniquely fortunate to have been able to have the two of you talking together. Those who will see this recording will no doubt very much appreciate the views that you've expressed and the discussion you've had. And on behalf of the Age of Scotland Institute, and through that with the Defence and Securities Forum, and Lady Olga Maitland, we would like to thank both of you for giving up your time to talk about this very difficult, critical situation. And to Shay, we wish you safety, and we hope that matters develop along the lines that the rest of the world does. This sort of aggression cannot be tolerated in a modern world, and clearly has to be dealt with. So to both of you, thank you so much, and look forward to catching up. And I hope the two of you can now connect, so now that you've seen each other on the screen. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.